Welcome to the Ancient Coin Podcast with Aaron Berk, a show about ancient coins from the viewpoint of a seasoned professional with nearly 30 years' experience. Here's Aaron Berk and Mike Nodelman on the Ancient Coin Podcast.
And the sound of the gong means it is time yet again for another Ancient Coin Podcast with Aaron Berk, episode 4. I'm Mike Nodelman. He's Aaron Berk. Yeah, 4 for you. And let's see, what do we got for you this time around? Let's see. We're going to talk about Aaron's recent trip to New York, the auctions that happened there. Aaron has some rules for collecting ancient coins, and he has another pearl of wisdom for us, and we will do our name play segment. Maybe we'll even find a doofus of the week. So, without further ado, you, my friend, spent some time in New York this week. Well, last week.
Did. Well, last week, yeah. So I was there the 10th through the 16th for the New York International. I had to decide to cancel fun in Florida because it was running up too close to the New York International, and I was carrying a lot of bids for the auctions going into the New York International. So I had to make a business decision. But I was sad not to have gone to Florida for the warm weather and the good friends and colleagues that were down there.
And you wound up in New York for the cold and the cold and flu season.
Well, 2 of the days it got up to almost 50.
Okay, that's livable.
And then it went down to like 12 degrees, almost like Chicago.
Yeah, we were balmy last week. Yeah,
right. Well, they always say that for New York, it's Chicago weather 2 days past.
Okay, so I need to go there in September.
There you go. So, the New York International, giving you a little synopsis of it, they do it a little bit differently. They run the major auctions before the show starts. So they run Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, are 3 days of auctions starting at 9 a.m. and running all the way until 1 in the morning, depending on the auction house. And then Thursday is set up for the show. Thursday night is another auction, and then the public hours are Friday, Saturday, Sunday, with auctions every night after the show closes, which is really important to note because a lot of other venues out there like to have auctions running during the show, which I think is not fair to the dealers that are actually set up.
Well, I see it from both sides, and from the standpoint of the auction company, they see it as a 9 to 5. They're there, they're there all day. But to be really honest with you, it's like, look, the dealers are there to do business. So, if you have auctions running concurrently with the stuff that's going on the bourse floor, one of the two is going to have to suffer. So I really do like the way that this is set up, where you have auctions by themselves, and then you have bourse floor time, and you have auctions separately from that. Plenty of auctions to go around, and yet,
Yeah, and if you're a dealer representing clients, and you happen to go to a show by yourself, it's kind of not fair to have to leave the bourse floor to go to an auction. A lot of these companies, you can do it online, but if you're trying to deal with clients on the floor and then you have to leave to go bid in an auction, that's not very cool either.
So yes, well done, New York International Numismatic Convention, and you were mentioning that there was a lot of traffic, international traffic specifically.
There was. So this is the premier show for ancient coins and world coins. More for ancient coins, I would say. Oh, world coins too, why not? So, and this is the only show that all the Europeans come over for. It's really a worldwide market. They don't come over for a lot of the other shows, but for this particular show, they all come. And that includes not only all the dealers from around the world, but also a lot of the collectors will come to bid in the auctions, as well as to see everybody, all our other peers. So once a year, we get to see everybody that we hadn't seen since the last New York International. So that's kind of nice. A little history of the New York International. It goes all the way back to when it was on the mezzanine of the World Trade Center. And it was in December. And the idea was that a lot of the Europeans would bring their wives and family to go Christmas shopping in New York. And so it was a pull for them to come over. And then, unfortunately, we had 9/11. And they scrambled to find a new venue. And it was at the Waldorf Astoria in January, which then started to be a conflict with the Fun Show. Before that, it was never a conflict because New York International was in December and the Fun Show was in January. And so a lot of the dealers who used to go to both shows now can only go to one.
Do you know if there's any thoughts on moving it back to December?
Well, I don't think so, because I think, the problem is once you have a show in place for a decade or more, it's really tough to get it to move to a different month.
Okay.
I wish they would, honestly.
Well, you'd think that a move that's good for business
you'd
think that a move that's good for business is a move that's good for business.
You would think so, but they sign these contracts with the hotels that are usually 5 years. So, I guess we'll find out in 5 years, because this is now the third location that they've had it since New York International.
Gotcha.
And hotel was nice. The auction room and the bourse floor and all the viewing rooms were on the first 2 floors of the hotel. So easy peasy. Didn't have to leave the hotel if you didn't want to. And so let's talk about the auctions.
Well, and I just want to add one more note. One of the nice things about New York is that it is a hub, right? So it is central for West Coast dealers, East Coast dealers, but more importantly, European dealers. They do, you're right, they want to come to New York because of the big city and the buzz and the things that they can do there much more than they might to, say, Topeka.
I mean, I wouldn't say, some of the California dealers were complaining because it was like coming to New York for them is almost going to Europe, because the flight and the time difference is so much of a difference, but it is, it's not a cheap place to go. I'll tell you that.
No.
Especially if you spend a week in a hotel in New York, it's very expensive. But it's definitely an experience. If you are a ancient coin collector, especially, it's definitely something you should do in your lifetime at least once. So, getting into the auctions, I'm going to do them based on the order that they happened. Monday night was the Heritage Auction for their platinum sale, and prices were strong. Some head scratchers definitely in there based on people buying the plastic and not the coin. But that seems to always be the case with companies that just sell slabs. I bought actually the 2 Syracuse decagrams.
So we're looking at the first coin right now.
Yeah, so there were a lot, I think 2 and 3 in the sale.
Correct.
And I don't know if people fell asleep, but I think I bought these at a bargain. So, they were still expensive, but I bought them for $60,000 and $65,000 hammer for a client. And
very similar looking coins.
What's that?
Very similar looking coins.
Yeah, well, one's a signed die by Uenitos, and the other one is an unsigned die. So they're different in their own way. And
so let me guess. The lot 2 is the signed die.
Yes.
See, I'm learning. I'm picking it up.
There you go. And they were encapsulated. And it was funny because I had them at the show and people wanted to see them. And people were saying to me, they were looking at the grades and they were saying, this is really inconsistent. And just those 2 slabs, they were like, these grades don't make any sense. And I was like, I didn't buy them for the grade. I bought them for the coins.
So what did you do about that?
Well, at the client's, actually I was talking to my client and he said, can't wait to free them from those coffins. And I said, would you like me to do it for you? He said, absolutely. And so we cracked those out. And if you want to show that picture of my paw.
Yeah, with the gold coin.
No,
or is it the next one? Nah, there it is. There we go.
There it is.
So there's the 7 of them.
Yeah. So the other coins are coins I got in the Triton auction, but you can see the 2 freed Syracuse decagrams there. and now they are safely in the possession of their new owner.
Yeah, and they're free.
They're free,
as they should be.
And they look beautiful.
These are free-range coins now.
They're free coins.
Free-range coins.
So anyway, moving on, probably the biggest auction for the entire New York International is the Triton Auction, which is put on by C&G. They do a 2-day auction. It is Tuesday and Wednesday from morning. They have morning sessions and afternoon sessions. And then that night of is the New York sale, which I'll talk about in a second. So the Triton Auction, again, very, very strong prices. I probably only got maybe 20% of what I went after. I was underbidder on a lot of material, but the prices were really strong. And I have to say also, I would say less than 2% of the sale are slab coins. So, there are slabs in there, but the people who bid in this auction, they are this is true market. These are the people that are the sophisticated buyers of ancient coins around the world. And so prices were strong, very, very strong. The bubble has not popped yet. It seems to be continuing. And so that's a good thing, I suppose. In some cases, it's a seller's market. It's a seller's market. What can I say? So the New York sale, if you want to go on to that one, that's actually run by Goldberg, M&M, Dmitry Markov, and Sovereign Rarities. So it's four auction houses, and they actually run 3 nights of auctions. I would say the prices were not as strong. There was a couple things that went well, but I think that there was definitely some deals to be had. And the advantage of following Triton is you tend to find deals in some of the other auction houses that are running through the New York International. And I think I got some deals for some clients in there, which was great. And so you always want to think about that when you're bidding in auctions. Sometimes the residual auctions that are there, they may not have the best material, but there are some diamonds in the rough there. The last auction went on Sunday, not the ideal time. After the show was over, the show ended at 3, and the Stax Bowers auction started at 3:30. So, and they are running this famous collection, I think it's Sultan collection, and it has I think I've heard 8,000 coins in it, and they're going to be running in conjunction with Kunker in Germany. I've been told that Kunker will be handling a lot of the Roman gold that'll be coming up in their next auction, but a lot of material. Most of it pedigreed. I would say I viewed the entire sale, and I would say amazing pedigrees, not great quality coins. They all had problems, every single one. There was a couple that didn't, but overall, the pedigrees were more beautiful than the coins, which we'll find later why they went well. And they did. They went very strong.
That's quite a statement.
I almost got shut out of this auction, and I had a lot of strong bids. And I think I walked away with 3 coins, and I was going after maybe 20. So, and I was underbidder a bunch of times. But prices were extremely strong there for a Sunday afternoon. And then I think the auction went. I think my section ended where I had no more bids was like around 6 o'clock, and I jumped in the cab and ran to the airport. And got out of Dodge.
Well,
so I was literally working from the time I got there to the time I left. I never stopped. It was ridiculous.
Our little Energizer bunny.
Yeah, I don't have much energy these days. So, but I was successful for a lot of clients, and I did my job. So the show was also very good. There was a lot of traffic there. There was a big fear that a lot of Europeans wouldn't come. That was not true. A lot of the Europeans did come. And so I was very surprised how many people were there.
I'm starting to see what you were referring to in some of the coins from Stax Bowers. And
the quality,
particularly,
yeah.
yes, I mean, I'm looking at a coin that realized 5,000. So I mean, we're not talking about a drop in the bucket kind of or a common coin. It's
Right.
a didrachm
Hmm.
from 280 BC, and it's strike 4 or 5, which I disagree with. Even as little as I know, I think it's worse than that. And the artwork is kind of So
Like I said, the pedigrees were a lot better than the coins.
yeah,
There's no
and
doubt
this
about it.
looks to be a really nice coin. I mean, but it just could be so much better.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
But if you like pedigree, it's a great sale. So, and I can tell you, I was sitting in the auction, and it wasn't the Chinese that were buying all the coins; it was the Germans that were buying all the coins.
Really?
Yeah, yep.
So why
Quite
is
a
it
few of
that you
them.
suspect that Germans would be buying the coins? Is it strong mark? Is it
They had some clients that probably were gaga over the pedigrees, and they went very strongly after them. So I'm Germans didn't buy the whole sale, but they were in contention a lot. Well, I was there anyway. May have been, they may not have gotten stuff later in the sale, but I was just there through. I think I was there for the first 155 lots, and then I took off.
okay?
And while I was there, the Germans were buying up a lot of it. So anyway, I mean, they beat me out on all the lots I
Would
was
they
going
would
after.
they have said the same thing about you?
I don't know if they all have podcasts.
Fair point. Fair point.
So, but it's good. They had a good client. Somebody leaned over to me and said, "I hope they're not buying for stock." And I said, "I don't think so." So anyway, yeah. So successful New York International for us. We did good business there. Met some good friends there as usual, and the auctions were very strong overall,
Well, that's good. It sounded like a successful trip all the way around.
all the way around. Yeah, yeah. So another hot topic that we haven't gotten into. We've kind of talked about it a little bit, and that is the rules and regulations of collecting ancient coins. And there's some misconception because there are no laws in the United States anyway. There are no laws that says you can't collect ancient coins or ancient artifacts, none whatsoever. Um, but there are regulations on what we as Americans can bring into this country. One thing that we did early on, our American government did early on, is because we Americans are a melting pot of the world. And so we wanted to bring our heritage over because as Americans, we are from every country. So, they made a rule that anything over 100 years old you could bring into the United States tax free. And so that obviously includes ancient coins and ancient artifacts. So there is a fee for customs actually processing, but it's like point zero. It's like minimal fee. So like
But
on
it's
$1
based on
million
the
dollars.
but
Go
it's
ahead.
based on the value of the artifact, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it could be $1 million, and maybe your fee is a couple $100. It's nothing. And in general, it's tax free. I mean, it is tax free. It's just that they have this fee associated. As Americans, we can pretty much bring in any value item we want and not worry about ramifications of high tariffs, which is wonderful for us.
Yeah,
So,
I think it's important to note, and I think it's important for the listeners to note that. So what you're saying is that there is no risk to Americans bringing any of this stuff in under American law, and where the repercussions fall is under the laws of the places where this stuff is being brought from.
in source countries, there's two countries in the world that actually have what is called treasure trove laws. One is Israel, and the other one is the UK. And in those countries, you can legally export things that you find after you talk to the government. Or in Israel's case, you have to take it to the Israeli museum, and they have to sign off on it. And then they will give you the ability to export it out of the country.
So they get to note it and catalog it just for the posterity of it.
Well, and know where it was found, if it was found, because there's people who have collected for millennia. So, it could be an old collection too. And there was some trouble with Israel not long ago. And it's mainly, and I'll get into some of this, but it's mainly because of very wealthy Americans who think that they're above the law and who bring things into the country illegally. And get caught, and they're bringing in national treasures. And in the case of Israel, it had to do with the family that owns Hobby Lobby, and they were building the largest museum in Washington, D.C., I think it's called the Living Bible, Living Torah, something. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's the largest museum in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And they wanted to prove they're very religious Christians, and they wanted to prove that the Bible was everything in the Bible is factual. So they wanted artifacts for that, and they got what's called Israeli fever, and they went over and they got involved with Arabs and some Israeli families, bought up a lot of material, and it was exported out and not recorded. And then he got caught because they were bringing in Sumerian objects and all kinds of other things. As furniture and not as actual antiquities. And so he got caught. He was fined, I think, $3 or $4 million. And then they arrested all the families in Israel. And then the Israeli Authority for a while wanted to actually shut down all collecting. They fought it. All the collectors and dealers over there fought it, and they actually won. And so they're now allowing things out again. That may not last forever. Who knows? But so far, so good. In fact, I just bought 10,000 widow's mites out of Israel legally, so with papers and everything. So you wonder why I need 10,000 widow's mites, but these things are gonna run out. You can't have this stuff forever.
I think they're finding less and less even
in Israel. What's that?
I said I think the guy from Hobby Lobby might be onto something. By the way,
maybe
the 10,000 widow's mites.
Maybe. So basically the way it works is there's a committee called CPAC, which stands for Cultural Property Advisory Committee.
Not to be confused with the other CPAC.
Correct. So, and this is a group committee that when a country, let's say Italy, which was the very first restriction that came up. So Italy made a request for ancient, they mainly go after antiquities. Coins was not something that they went after at first. So in the year 2000, they came out with the Italian restriction. And it was actually the last thing that President Clinton signed before he left office. And my understanding is that Hillary Clinton had, somebody was on the board who knew her. And so as a favor to this person, they jammed this through right at the end. And so CPAC basically will listen to the request from the country and then decide whether or not to put it on a restriction of what we as Americans can bring in. So they started out with pottery and other artifacts that were found in South Italy. And what was really interesting is that they included Corinthian and Attic pottery. Well, Corinthian is not Italian, and Attic is not Italian. But they know that a lot of that material is found in Italy, so they added it to the restriction in 2000. And but coins were not on the restriction because the one thing about coins, and this is the thing we always argue with CPAC, is that coins were mass-produced, they were made to travel, and they're found everywhere. And so to say that a specific country owns something like a coin is pretty ignorant because, for instance, the Roman Empire had a huge expansion. And so during that expansion, are you going to tell me that a coin that's found in Spain under the Roman Empire that was then traded to the UK in ancient times and found there? And so who owns it? Does the UK own it because they found it there? Does Spain own it because that's where it was minted? Or does the Roman Empire own it because it was minted during their rule?
And I think even simpler than that, and particularly in the case of coins, when you look at it, you have something that was meant as a means of exchange. So the fact of ownership is merely temporary for these anyway. So long-term ownership, you've got more of a thing with antiquities and with artifacts, but with money, now you have something that was, it was meant to be exchanged. It was meant to be disseminated. And so therefore to argue that anybody actually, it's like, hey, my $10 bill says United States of America. That doesn't mean that the government owns it.
Right. So it's it's a very difficult thing to discuss. And what has happened is, so basically the way it works is CPAC actually will hear the request from the country. They open it up to public forum. And so sometimes you'll see our company and other companies will say, hey, this restriction's coming up, and write letters to this email or this fax number about why it shouldn't be placed, why coin shouldn't be on there, or whatever the case might be. And then the committee then decides, they make a ruling, or they write basically a paper of what they've decided. That doesn't mean it goes into law. It means it goes to the State Department. The State Department then decides what they want to put into law for what we can bring into the country. It's not really law, but just as a restriction for customs purposes. And it usually follows the restriction date. So that means that anything, for instance, in 2000, if you had a Greek vase found in South Italy and it has a pedigree to 1999, it didn't. The 2000 restriction did not affect that at all. So that meant vases before 2000 went up in value. That's all that meant. It really didn't change a whole lot. And these restrictions, once they're passed, they come up for renewal every 5 years. And so every 5 years, the Italians were, they were trying to put coins on. And eventually they did put coins on. But they kept it to the time before the Roman expansion. So the Roman Republican period and before. And some of the imperatorial period as well. But for them to put on provincial coins from all the Greek provinces, I don't know how they can do it. But they slowly started putting coins on specific restrictions, and they've been passing, and it's mainly because archaeologists got on the CPAC committee, and they don't care about collectors. They hate collectors, and so it was a losing battle no matter what. And in fact, at one point, CPAC wrote that coins, I don't remember which restriction it was, might have been Cyprus. They put that coin shouldn't be on, and then it went to the State Department, and the State Department put coins on anyway. And we had the group that fights that actually had to get them to open the records by court ruling, and it took them like over a year or more to get the paperwork to find out what happened. And the State Department just decided to do it because somebody in the State Department wanted to do Cyprus a favor.
Right. They decided that they wanted to be more politically correct, right? They wanted to do it that way. Or maybe there was, whatever.
And what's the whole point of having CPAC if the State Department's going to do what they want to do anyway without actually the committee, which is the whole point?
Well, it does seem to short circuit the entire process.
100%. And so, again, there's one person on the committee now that collects coins, but it's a losing battle, and it's a losing battle because of the antiquity parts of it. And you can't decipher between antiquities and antiquity. Most of them are indigenous to the region, but not all. I mean, if you look at the first Italian restriction, the Athenians or the Sicilians, exported a lot of their pottery, and that's why they were found in Italy, and that's why Italy put them on the restriction. But are they really Italian? No, but so these things did travel, even ancient artifacts. But you can't decipher between a base and a facade of a building. They're both antiquities. You can't say, well, this antiquity is different than this antiquity. They're all antiquities. And so that's very difficult. But coins, again, for the reasons I mentioned, plus most silver and gold coins are treasury coins, and they're not found on sites. They find bronze coins on sites, which was the coins that most people spent. They do not find gold and silver, because if you had a treasury of a hoard of coins of value, you went and buried them out in the countryside, where nobody was around. Mm-hmm. That was your bank. That was your safety deposit box. So you didn't bury them at your house. You buried them. Sometimes they did, but in general, that's not the case. And a lot of militaries, armies, when they were moving to pay their soldiers, they actually had mints moving with them. They were actually striking coins and right in place. And then they would bury them, go off to war, die, and there was only a handful of people who probably knew about it. And if they died, then nobody knows until 2,000 years later when they find them.
Well, I think that was like my first, what do I want to call it, epiphany about ancient coins, was the fact that, these coins weren't really made for circulation in Rome. They were made for paying the armies, as the armies went out and destroyed and pillaged and did all the other things. So that was just kind of a light bulb moment for me. Yeah. But it was a light bulb moment for me, saying, oh, okay, now I understand the whole idea of the coinage and why so much of the coinage wound up in so many other places.
Exactly. I'm going to bring up this Michael Steinhardt. He is one of the largest collectors of antiquities in the world. He recently made the news because he had to give back $70 million worth of looted antiquities, and which was 180 pieces.
It's a mere bag of shells.
Yeah. So when this came out, somebody from CPAC actually called me and said, this is making huge, bad publicity in the State Department. They're freaking out over this. And this, and we've lost our swing vote now. And I thought, yeah, this is bad. And then I talked to some antiquity people I know who actually know Steinhardt. And the first thing they said to me was, don't believe everything you read. Because first off, he has thousands of pieces. So all that they did was vet his collection. And 70 million sounds like a lot, but he has Monet's worth 70 million or more. So,
So it truly was a bag of shells. It was nothing. Right.
And, I'm not saying he didn't do anything wrong. He did. A lot of these guys, he's 81 years old. A lot of these guys, they were buying in the 50s and the 60s. And there was no laws for any of this stuff.
It was the Wild West back then.
Yeah. And so there was no customs for this stuff. It was ridiculous. And governments didn't, maybe they cared, the source countries, but in a lot of the source countries, the people that were running the country were actually dealing in the objects as well and making money off of them. So I've heard lots of stories like that. So it's only in the last, since the Iraq War in the early 90s that we're starting to see a lot of this fight, and with good reason. But when you look at a guy like this, you can spin publicity however you want. They make it sound like terrible. And they say he can never buy an antiquity again. The guy's 81. He has thousands of pieces. I don't think he needs to buy any more anyway.
Well, so yes, as irrelevant as that may be. I mean, it seems like the New York Times piece is kind of a hit piece. It does seem a little bit that way. And if you really get down to think about it, okay, even from a totality standpoint, it's a very small percentage of what he actually held. So if you think about when he acquired it, the time period that it was, for him to have a percentage of it is almost inevitable. And for it to be a small percentage actually lends him more credibility than the story seems to give him that break.
Well, the one thing you got to remember, this guy makes news because he buys national treasures, right? So if he has 1,000 pieces that are national treasures, it's not like he's got crap laying around. It's all amazing stuff.
Yeah.
And so if he decides to put all of his pieces on the market, that's going to freak out the source countries because it's just going to be a massive amount of material. And nobody can say anything about it because they just vetted his entire collection.
Well, they're his now.
So he can do whatever he wants now.
Yeah.
And so, it's bad publicity, but it's just a matter of what you know and what the inside scoop is in a lot of these scenarios.
It might have been better if they were a little bit more fair on that.
Yeah. And so, so there is a group that's fighting for you collectors. It is the ACC Guild. Mike will bring up that website.
Oh, you got that. The Ancient Coin Collectors Guild.
Yeah, and so they are the ones that watch for these restrictions that come out. Peter Tampa, who's a coin collector for a long time, a good friend. He's in Washington and he's lobbying with CPAC all the time on our behalf. He's financed by the P&G organization as well as the IPN. So both organizations give him money, but he does it for the love of collecting.
Nice website.
Yeah. So I would suggest making contributions here or just signing up and just watching for things to happen. There was a movement in New York to see if we could put more money together as an industry and try to fight more on a lobbying standpoint. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. They're talking about a lot of money to be able to, fight against this. I mean, you got to remember, we're fighting against the archaeologists, and the archaeologists are on the side of righteousness, and we're on the side of corruption as far as they're concerned. And so it's very hard to argue our way out of some of these scenarios. You have to remember that, and this is going to get controversial here. I'm going to get controversial.
No.
But in my opinion, unless you legalize the trade, you will never stop things from being looted. Things have been looted since the ancient times. It's human nature. And so you can create all these laws and regulations, but there's always going to be somebody out there who's going to buy it. And somebody who is a looter doesn't care about laws. If they did, they wouldn't be called looters. So it's kind of like what we did with, I hate to compare it to the drug trade, but now we're legalizing marijuana all over the United States. And for years and years, we put away people in jail, and now we're expunging all those records. And you may agree with it, maybe you don't agree with it. But in the end, a lot of these U.S. states decided we're out of money, and this is a great way to make money. And so the cultures or the source countries have resources in the ground. I don't think it's historic and it's valuable, but it's a resource like oil or anything else that they can export. And a lot of the material that comes out of the ground is not worthy of a museum. It's worthy for an archaeologist to study where it came out of the ground. But, if you legalize some of this, now it's tough in a lot of these countries because if you're talking about Syria, it's a broken country. Look what happened at Palmyra. ISIS got it and they blew it all up. And so, you think about that and you wonder, should some of this stuff go back to some of the source countries? I don't know. I'm not so sure when you've got fanatics that can decide on a dime to blow up sites. Maybe the Rosetta Stone is safer in the British Museum than it is in Egypt. I don't know. So it's a tough discussion to have, but also if you think about it, a lot of these source countries weren't always controlled by the people that were living there. If the Turks came in and took over Greece, now you've got a different group of people, that were there 1,000 years before that. And so, the countries of today are not the countries that were running it back then, in ancient times. So it's really tough to know who owns what. And a lot of it has to do with money.
Yeah. Well, and there's where I think, look, there is a righteous indignancy that people have on, look, you just don't want to funnel a ton of money into the black market because that does fund crime. But, if you take that apart for a minute, it's like the stuff that is getting looted, you're not funding terrorism. That's not what's happening. These guys they're funneling the money into their pockets. That's what's going on. It's a black market, and black markets exist, and they've existed forever. Now, legalizing it might bring a bit more sunlight to it, and that is going to get rid of a lot of the criminal elements involved. So, that might help to kind of disinfect, what's going on.
When there was no laws governing this stuff, and nobody cared, everybody shared everything. The museum, academics, the dealers, the collectors, and the people who were finding things. Everybody shared everything. Well, there was nothing hidden.
Well, the thing that I think is so ironic is that the museum people, despise the collectors. And the fact of the matter is that the museum people are, in a sense, collectors. I mean, that's what they are.
Well, how about the fact that if it wasn't for a collector, there would be no museum?
Right.
Because without collectors, they started the museums.
But that's what I'm saying is even these curators, they're collectors themselves. They're building these giant collections, and it's just a giant peeing contest for the world.
Well, and now, people aren't giving it, a lot of the collectors have been vilified. The big ones I'm talking about, the ones who buy national treasures. And so, like Steinhardt, who was giving to the Met and other museums. And so, they're not going to necessarily reach into their pocket and give the museums money, and museums are running out of money because guess what? State governments are running out of money.
Sure.
And the first thing that goes is going to be money for the arts.
Yes.
And so, another thing, I did a deaccession for the Toledo Museum of Art about 3-4 years ago. And all the stuff was pedigree before 1970. And they got vilified for selling it on the open market by the Cyprus and Egyptian government, even though they didn't do anything wrong. No. And most of the stuff was not nice. And it's really ridiculous, that a museum who decides, when they have to house something for over 100 years, they have to pay their insurance for that. They have to. There's costs that are involved with that. When they go to sell artifacts or coins or anything from their collection, they're supposed to use it to buy other pieces in their collection. So let's say they sell off all this garbage that's been sitting in their vault for 100 plus years, and they turn that into, let's say, $2 or $3 million. Now they take $2 or $3 million and they go buy a great piece. And now instead of things being stuck in the back room where no one ever sees it, now they get a stellar piece that they can trade with another museum, because museums trade with each other when they do shows. And now Toledo can get something nicer, as part of their collection to show off. And what's wrong with collectors owning some of that stuff that makes them happy? I mean,
sometimes it's the only way some of that stuff's ever going to be seen.
Right. Look, I had a collector, a very good collector for Egyptian, and his company helped finance the King Tut exhibit to come to Chicago. And if he didn't collect Egyptian artifacts, he would have never financed that. And so now, because of somebody very wealthy that has means, his company helped finance the King Tut exhibit. And, Egypt was like $20 million. I mean, they're not doing it for free. And so, now a small child goes to the Egyptian, maybe he's never going to be able to travel to Egypt in his lifetime, but he's able to go to the Field Museum and see the Egyptian artifacts from King Tut's tomb.
That's me.
And that could change a kid's life. And now all that was because of one collector. And that one collector is not even collecting national treasures. It's just stuff.
And nobody can name him.
Well, I'm not going to name
Well,
them.
you can't, but I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's like, so most of this
Right.
work is done in anonymity. It's not about the fame. It's not about the fort. It's about sharing knowledge and
Right.
educating people. It's just doing the right
Well, and how
thing.
about yeah, and how about just having a better understanding of different cultures, right? So when you own something,
No,
like I
because then
have
we'll
clients
have
that
to
have
get
40
along.
$40 oil lamps, and then that would never be in a museum. And they have friends come over and say, "What's that?" "Oh, that was found in Israel, or this was found in Rome." "Wow, that's amazing." And then they start talking about ancient culture, and they start talking about those people. "Oh, wow, those people were amazing." Now maybe you have a better understanding and an open mind about racism. I mean, it can go as far as that.
It
It really
can. I mean,
could.
and then we start to get along because we understand each other better. It's amazing how that works.
So the archaeologists think that by creating all these rules and regulations that they're actually going to stop the trade. But what they're doing is they're raising the prices, because what's going to happen is anything that's pre 1970, which is part of the UNESCO treaty, CPAC can't touch that stuff. No country can touch that. And so you have the wealthiest people in the world fighting over that material. And that goes with ancient coins also. Again, it has nothing to do with being legal or not. It has to do with what you can move in and out of borders. And so the prices are going through the roof on because there's less material that was pedigree before 1970, only because it doesn't mean it was a lot of the stuff is out, but in, let's say, 1968, a coin that's worth $5,000 today was worth $100 back then, and nobody put it in a catalog. And so it doesn't have any photographic information that it was out of the source country before 1970. And so, because a lot of this stuff didn't have value back then. And so basically, something that doesn't have a pedigree or ownership, even though it may have come out 100 years ago, it's treated as the same as if it was looted yesterday. As far as like, you don't know. You
Yeah, it
don't
just
know.
wasn't
And
important enough
so,
to figure out.
right. And so to actually have paperwork and photographs of something that is a pre 1970 pedigree, now you have people fighting over it, prices go up, and the internet has made things so transparent that even people in source countries have access and they see what these things bring. And so, if they find something in their backyard or wherever, and they see that it brought $100,000 in an auction, you don't think they're going to go try to sell it, for half or
Sure.
even a third? I mean, all they're doing is raising the values of these things. And when Syria was looted, and not everything is terrorists either. That's the other thing. The archaeologists and the papers love to throw it all at terrorism. It's not true. So I'm not saying it didn't happen completely, but that's not where most of the looting is happening. As
No,
Mike alluded to
and that's
earlier.
not where the money's going.
Right. And so I can guarantee you, in fact, I know because I was never offered anything coming out of Syria, that stuff was going to the Arab countries, if anything. And in fact, I just saw not long ago, there was an article about some dignitary in Beirut who was doing an interview, and there was a bunch of looted stuff from Syria in his office. So, then he denied. There's always going to be somebody, there's always going to be a country, there's always going to be some individual who's going to buy something. There's no way around that. And so if you can't beat them, then legalize it out of them. And then you won't have any worries. And those countries could make money off of it. Then and I'm not saying it's a perfect system. There's always going to be somebody who's going to go around the system. But if you can get a majority of the material being recorded, and information being shared. There are probably coins being found today in source countries that no one will ever know where they were found because it's gone through so many hands and nobody knows. So whereas look on the internet, you always see these coin hoards found in the UK. They have treasure trove laws. So guess what? You get legitimate people metal detecting, not crime type people, and they do things the right way. And look, it was exciting. I bought 10,000 coins out of Israel legally. It's a beautiful thing. So and that's the way it should be. And until they get their heads out of their behinds and realize that they can do more by legalization, they're not addressing the problem. The problem is with the source countries. I mean, we can talk about it like Is the problem with our border with South America, or is it the problem with countries, countries in South America that have broken down and are run by maniacs? You got to fix the problem in the source country before you could ever fix the end result. And antiquities and coins are
seemingly
no
it's
different.
it's not a problem here in the States. It is truly a source country problem.
It's a source country problem. So we're not here to police every source country in the world. And a lot of these source countries, not all, but there are a lot of source countries where there's people in the government that are controlling a lot of what comes out sometimes. Not always the case, but I've heard lots of stories, and so it's unfortunate, but that's the only way I see around it. So anyway,
That's going to take some time.
So when you see a pre-1970 pedigree and you see the coins go up way in value, that's why. So our nameplate.
Oh no! Wait, we have our pearl.
Oh yeah, pearl. Yeah, we have a necklace.
Because stop it. This comes from this last segment that we were doing. So your pearl this week is collecting ancient coins.
The ancient coins is not against the law.
That's right.
First and foremost.
And in the United States, it doesn't really.
In the United States.
It's not against the law, period.
No, not.
Full stop.
Right.
Okay, now we can get on to our nameplay. So, this looks like a name that some people might have a problem with.
Yeah, how would you pronounce it?
Well, I would call it Tacitus, but
that's correct.
But
Tacitus.
There's a word taciturn, and I think it might even, who knows? I don't know.
Well, you could say Tacitus.
Yeah,
but those are I suppose if you said Tacitus, it's probably the same people that call a euro a gyro.
That's probably true, and they argue that they're correct.
The Greeks are turning in their in their graves.
Well, we use a funny alphabet anyway. So,
right,
so
exactly.
what do you have to tell us about Tacitus?
So Tacitus was a Roman emperor. He was only around for between 275 and 276 AD, so in the 3rd century. And during his short reign, he campaigned against the Goths and the Heraculi, which was basically the Germanic tribes. And then he received a title of Gothicus Maximus, which just means he won wars. And it was a great honor that the Senate would give to a Roman emperor.
So that was a triumph that they gave to him, right?
Yeah. And then eventually they would put titles on the coin. And if you look at some of these coins here, you'll see the beauty of the Roman Empire is that the name is spelled out on all these coins. And if you look in the legend there about halfway through, you'll see Tacitus. Yes. Tacitus. And so if you don't recognize the coin, you can always read the coin.
Yeah.
So they have his titles, then his name, and then some more titles. Well, mostly it's going to be having to do with the dating. So most Roman coins are dated, and it'll tell you exactly when they were actually minted.
No, that's according. So how do they number it?
Well, it has Roman numerals, usually at the end of the legend.
No, but I mean from a how do I want to put it? From a historical standpoint, because if they're numbering it, I know they're not using the same numbering system that we use today. So that's kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah, they are.
Are they?
I mean, essentially. Well, it's different, but it's not.
Okay, so they are using the AD, the BC and AD, and it's carried on all this time.
Sure.
Okay, so that's my doofus.
On the reverse of the coin, usually they'll have the mint where it was actually produced as well, and it'll have little symbols for that as well. We'll go over, I think we'll have to do a segment just on coin identification, which would be interesting.
Sure.
But we'll have to do that. But I think that for this show, I really wanted to get into the rules and regulations because it's a big problem, and I think that it is detrimental to the health of the industry, and it's definitely worth knowing and getting involved if you want to.
Well, it's definitely a hot issue and it's something that there's a lot of opinions on. And
and we're not afraid to talk about hot topics on the show.
No, we certainly are not.
No.
So
we do it with a smile on our face. Though.
Well, I mean, we try to do it with some humor. I mean, but the fact of the matter is that you take a stand one way or the other. You may agree, you may disagree. But
no, I mean, I'm not trying to bring in this show. I'm not trying to bring anybody out, or even when I talk about MGC, I'm not saying that you shouldn't slap coins. I'm always talking about what I see as a dealer and the problems that I see. It doesn't mean that I'm against something or for something, and just telling you the realities of it.
Yeah, and just as you see it.
Well, it's not just how I see it; it's how most people in my industry that have been in it for a long time see it. So it's not like I'm out on an island.
Okay, that is the mainstream consensus then.
If you've been around, collecting and dealing for as long as I have, most of us all have the exact same. And people say like, "Oh, well, you're in it for the money." Okay, I make a living off of it. Sure, absolutely. But I also believe that I do something that's great for history, because, if I find it, like I deal with antiquities. If I find antiquities in some, local estate house that somebody has a collection, they didn't know what it was, and I bring it back to market and properly identify it, or I restore it properly because somebody destroyed it because they did a bad restoration job. Yes, I'm making money off of it, but I'm also bringing it back to its original state. I'm bringing it back to market and finding a new home for it. I call them orphans. And so, because there isn't a place for them. And so I feel like I'm doing my due diligence for the cultures as well. And you can say I'm a sellout or whatever you want, but I feel differently from my point of view.
Well, I think that eventually everything goes to the rubbish bin, right? And were it not for the fact that people decided to pull things out and say, hey, look, this is worth keeping. This is worth looking at. This is something that we want to, recognize later on. All of these things go back to, remembering the lessons of history so that we don't repeat the mistakes.
The other thing, too, and I forgot to bring this up, is that we always make this argument with CPAC, is that collectors and dealers write the books for numismatics. Most archaeologists do not write books on coins. They don't care about coins. Coins are only used for one thing. That's to date the site that they're actually excavating. Beyond that, they could care less. They'd say that they care, but I don't think they care as much. Or they would write a hell of a lot more coin books, and they don't.
I thought you were going to go for the easy one. The only thing that they care about coins is the ones that get paid to them to go in their pocket. That's pretty much it.
Well, that's without saying.
Okay, so this has been a hot button episode. Any other third rails you want to step on before we get done?
I'm good. Oh, thanks guys for all the support. Really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun for Mike and I to do this.
Absolutely.
And we'll keep bringing them to you. We now have a page on our website that is just for podcasts. And we'll have always listed all the podcasts that we do from here on out. And you can always find them on YouTube as well.
You can find them on YouTube, so you can go to Harlan J. Berk's website at hjbltd.com, and there you can see our smiling faces or whatever facsimile we put up. And they'll be there for your enjoyment, and on YouTube, and in our Facebook group.
And everywhere else.
Yeah. So, thanks to everybody for listening, and thanks for taking the time, Aaron, to share this with us. I have learned about Tacitus today, and maybe a couple other things about the business.
Well, that's my whole intention, Mike, is to teach you.
Well, I told you, this is my torture is on display for the world to see. Let's do it.
And you do it with such class.
Oh, thanks. So thanks everybody for listening. We'll talk to you next time on the Ancient Coin Podcast with Aaron Berk.
Thanks for listening to the Ancient Coin Podcast with Aaron Berk. We'll return with another episode soon. Meantime, you can join our private group on Facebook. Just go to facebook.com and search the Groups tab for Ancient Coin Podcast Discussion Group and ask to join. There you can become part of our community, where we share and discuss ancient coins, as well as the show, the ancient coin market, auctions, or just to give our own opinions on things in order to learn together. Join Aaron and Mike again soon for the next episode of the Ancient Coin Podcast with Aaron Berk.